Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. We have a very exciting guest, Brian with Iterate AI. For those of you just joining the podcast, I am Christian Gannon, the co founder of E.N.G Media, and we specialize in helping software and tech companies scale their revenue. So if you want to learn how to take your software or tech business to the next level, make sure to stick around. So let's get right into it. I understand Iterate AI is making it radically faster and easier to build intelligent AI agents, ones that are efficient, connected, and optimized to run on powerful chipsets. With your low-code platform, teams can deploy advanced AI across enterprise systems and edge devices in record time. Can you share more about your business, the services you offer, and your role within it?
First of all, thank you, Christian. Thanks for having me in the show. I'm very excited to be speaking to your listeners. Yeah, as you know, this entire agentic space is such a fast evolving space, and this is the first time in history where AI is going to be changing your bottom line within organizations, right? From creating significant amount of productivity within companies. In order to help leaders and development teams and enterprise teams, we essentially have a platform. It's kind of, in fact, it's two interconnected platforms. Our first platform is called Interplay, which is a drag and drop sort of low code type platforms. And it also helps you do vibe coding too if you want to generate code really rapidly, right? The idea is that allows you to build agents really fast because end of the day, as you are within the enterprise, you're looking at a business problem and how do you go to market quickly. That's what the leaders care about. And in fact, in our platform, it allows their development teams to move 17x faster, right?
Wow.
And on the other side, connected to that is we have another platform called Generate. So Generate is an enterprise agent building platform, but primarily targeted towards enterprise users and power users who are not developers. So you can sort
Mhm.
of do kind of the same thing instead of low code coding. Here you do a lot of, we have something called the card interface. It's like a card. You can
Mhm.
drag and drop and arrange these cards, and each card is an agentic process. So you can
That's
configure them
awesome.
very easily to kind of string them together to build what you need, right, for enterprise. And we are in a very exciting period of time because I think this is where where the rubber is hitting the road, and AI is automating a lot of the tasks and creating massive amounts of productivities and gains within companies.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And I wanted to kind of ask, how did the idea for Iterate come about? I know Igor recruited you and John, and you guys are kind of all involved in the process. So, what gap in the market were you really trying to solve when you decided to go ahead with Iterate?
Great question. I think just the history of the company a little bit. So Iterate went through a couple of evolutions, right, in the
Hmm.
the life cycle of the company. In the very beginning, when we were trying to solve the problem, as you know, I'm a serial entrepreneur, and after my first exit, I was spending some time doing investments, and I was sitting on a board of a incubator, and Igor was our chairman. So it was me and John
Okay.
Nordmark and a couple of other U.S. entrepreneurs. As a part of that journey, I think during that time we were in Ukraine helping companies invest in companies in Ukraine and help them through an acceleration to bring them to the American market. During that time is when this entire journey started because we would sit and talk about how do you get access to enterprises much faster, and how can startup technologies be integrated into sort of a canvas where you can deploy, because a lot of the matchmaking programs and all these things were very much human connections, right? How do you build a
Hmm.
software platform? And that was the kind of the gave birth eventually a few years later to Interplay, which became sort of the enterprise connection platform. And then as AI took over in 2017, 18, 19 timeframe, we started doing computer vision, data science capabilities on the platform. And then one thing led to another. And now, of course, we are doing a lot of generative AI capabilities, right? So there are essentially a couple of problems. One is actually trying to provide an access into a lot of new technologies, right? Say if you take Gen
Hmm.
AI, how do you do fine tuning? How do you do RAG? How do you do agents? How do you do write MCP servers? These are all like problems that are
Right.
kind
Of
of the,
course.
when you kind of begin to peel the onion, right? So we
Hmm.
provide templates and capabilities on the platform that you can do these things like super rapidly, right? So that's one one part of the issue that we were able to address. The other is also to optimize this thing across, because AI can be run in many modalities. It's not just the cloud providers, trying to use
Hmm.
Anthropic or ChatGPT, which is great. They have their big purpose. But also for privacy, security, for banks, finance institutions who wants to run AI securely within their four walls due to security and privacy. How do you do that too? So we support the cloud, the hyperscaler kind of large LLMs. We support, our private fine-tuned LLMs within on-premise systems or cloud systems, as well as we support. We even run on small devices. The smallest device we run this is in a Qualcomm 6490. So it's a tiny
Wow.
device, your POS.
Hmm.
Say you are a merchant and your POS gets stuck, and suddenly you want to ask a question instead of waiting to call the 1-800 support line and waiting on for like, hours on it. You can just quickly, say what happened, and you can quickly
Hmm.
recover and continue to run your business. And that's true for everything, heavy equipment, manufacturing. One of the companies we are right now looking at is mining, right? So
Hmm.
you have mining equipment, and suddenly, things begin to work or malfunction. How do you actually get information with it, right? So there's a lot of different industries we are looking at, and this type of, because our AI runs across every modality and runs across lots of different chipsets and highly optimized for those chipsets for performance, right? So every
Hmm.
token you're generating is valuable, and creating value, speed, efficiencies, and so on. So that's the other modality we support very effectively.
Of course. And I'm really glad you mentioned on-premise solutions. I think that's a big trend happening in software tech and the AI space across the board, especially in the industries you mentioned, like mining, healthcare, government entities, and knowing it's something that they can trust, right? In the sense that that data is not going to get out, it can't get leaked, it's not learning out on data outside of the organization, right? And that's
Right.
a huge thing and a huge problem that's trying to be solved right now. And I'm glad to hear that you
Yeah,
guys are
because
on
I
it,
think,
right?
right? Yeah, absolutely. Because one of the things that's happening is, end of the day, in the user's data is very valuable for these large LLM companies, right? The
Hmm.
foundation, the frontier model companies, right? So, I mean, few months back, these frontier models didn't even have any memory. Now they
Right.
have memory, so they know
Hmm.
who you are very explicitly, right? So this memory is much deeper memory, because earlier they always all cared was like, what sites Christian visited, and what what
Hmm.
ads Christian looked at, so, or what
Hmm.
products you looked at, so you could like do retargeting, right?
Right.
Now the memory is much more deeper, because in a chat prompt these days you ask all kinds of questions, about your, all the way from your personal finances to your company's operations to intellectual property related things. As memory is being built, I mean, of course you can turn off the memory, but then people, how many people really understand that, right? How many
Right.
users? I mean, if you are a enterprise and your IP, you don't want that to be put onto one of these memories that stays forever, right?
Definitely.
So now I think it's even more important to have systems that are within your four walls that can be protected and you have control over it, right?
Of
Because
course.
it's just not you as the leader of the company. There is a lot of workers underneath you, and they
Hmm.
don't they will do whatever is the easiest to get work done,
Right.
right? Convenience always trumps and overtakes security and compliance and intellectual property. So that's something that we provide a solution for.
Definitely. And I know that's a trend in this space. And kind of while we're talking about that, are you seeing any other trends in the enterprise AI space or maybe even the agentic AI space right now?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of great trends that are happening, right? I mean, there is a big trend, as we all know, the natural impact that AI can make, and the fastest impact that AI can make, especially the large language models with their, large context windows and everything, is in code generation. So,
Mhm.
with Windsurf and Cursor, and in fact, we have our own code generation engine called Agent One, right?
Okay.
And the
Hmm.
code generation, and then we are releasing that for Visual Studio free of charge for companies. And then
Wow.
the same version, we are also have an equivalent version of that that builds Lego blocks, not just regular code. So the regular code one, we are releasing it free of charge, so anyone can put their Anthropic key and start using it. But we also have an equivalent version of that that runs in Interplay as a part of the enterprise licensing as well. So code generation is significantly going to change the business, right? Because the larger companies that are building and releasing software, I mean, every day you see some release on some new capabilities. Most of these companies are actually starting to use 20 to 30% of their software development process by these engines. So
Hmm.
today, they like the last few months, they've been sort of aid in the sense that they don't run the
Right.
entire process. They've been aid to help in certain modules, right? But that's changing really rapidly. So you're going to get to a point where you're going to have full code generation, 80% of code, 95% of code is generated. And with this new MCPs and tools coming in, it's not just going to be generation, but security, compliance, and also deploying them. And that's one
Hmm.
area we are focusing on, right? DevOps, because
Right.
DevOps is a very any process that's a very defined deterministic process can be very quickly replaced by tools and LLMs, right? The
Hmm.
whole DevOps deployment part, because a lot of engineers today, that's one of the biggest problems in AI now. A lot of AI engineers are traditionally mathematicians, right? So they build in Jupyter, they build in whatever tools or in our tool, and then they throw it across the wall. And a lot of the IT guys probably don't know what these things do because they are all like different SDKs. They're not familiar with them, right?
Hmm.
So that this DevOps big connection, big interconnection, disconnect between DevOps systems as well as ML systems. So with this type of new LLMs and agentic process, that's going to be completely now AI developers can just productionalize them really rapidly, right, and across all the
Hmm.
clouds. So that's going to be this whole coding and DevOps and security compliance. That entire trend is going to, I think, explode. And that's an area I think the specific LLMs like Anthropic and others are getting super good, right? Their
Hmm.
performance is very good, and then the context windows are getting bigger and bigger, and the more you can do, right? So that's one area. The other thing I think is just in general in agents, the autonomous workers, because I think in January or maybe December of 2024, they said that uh, an enterprise user probably could get 1.5 hours of their work done by using a chat GPT or any LLM, any of the
Hmm.
frontier models, or even like our ones, like in Generate, the stuff that we provide, right? 1.5 hours worth of work, right?
Right.
Uh, but that window every 3 months, that window is doubling and tripling,
Wow.
right?
That's
Yeah.
insane.
So what it means is by December of 2025, this year,
Hmm.
a worker, an enterprise worker, you can be an executive, a legal, you can be a marketing analytics person, you can be a copywriter. You could get about 7 to 8 hours of your work done by December.
That's insane to think about, isn't it?
Right, right. Yeah, so I've even given a name to it. I'm gonna call it the Bryan's Law.
Hey, I don't mind that. I'll prove
I just
that.
put it the worker, the exponential worker productivity, right? So it's
Hmm.
it's actually getting to a point where it's beginning to do very sophisticated queries, right?
Of course.
Which I think is going to be a big, the autonomous worker and agentic helpers is going to be a real productivity boost, right? Because at the end of the day, the question is how much of the work you can do. So today, in realistically, I think in living in June now, I think it's you could probably get 30% or 40% done,
Hmm.
right? And by
Definitely.
December, I think it could get to a 95 to 100%, right? The other day, I was driving back home, and so I basically enabled the Chat GPT areas in voice and video mode and put it to
Mhm.
my Tesla, so I can just talk to it, so I don't need
Right.
to call the phone, right? And then basically I had like 18 emails that I had to send back because I was wanting to send that for a while and people were waiting for me. I pretty
Hmm.
much dictated my entire email and it rewrote
Wow.
everything fully ready, right? And then even like some of the emails were difficult in terms of content and everything because of there's so many nuances because it has memory about me. All my company decks are in there.
Hmm.
It did the whole thing and it turned out to be way better. And I came home, I just copied and pasted it. Eventually, they'll also introduce, I'm sure, an email tool that'll put it into your email. But the
Hmm.
idea is that very quickly you can get these things done, right? Some of our IT guys the other day, they wanted to configure some server. They just turned on the camera and said, "Hey, this is what I'm seeing. Tell me the error," and it took the whole thing, the
That's
whole thing up,
insane.
right? So a lot
Right.
of these type of things are beginning to become automated, and then it's almost like getting these things, giving these things an arm and a leg, right? Like because
Hmm.
earlier, LLMs were, if you consider them as the brain, they didn't have the physical arms. Tools are making, creating the arms, right? Because
Hmm.
the real power of this revolution, if you really think about it, is like look at us humans, right? How tall are you, Christian?
I'm 5'10" on a good
You're
day.
5'10". Okay, good. Okay, I'm 5'7", right? But the
Hmm.
idea is that, but if you look out the window and look at a building next to us, it's probably, 20 stories tall,
Hmm.
right? So as humans, a person who's 5'10" is building a building with, of course, series of humans by using tools and heavy machinery,
Hmm.
can build things that are much bigger than that, orders of magnitude bigger than that, right?
Of course.
Construction, space aircraft, space science, everything, right? So that's
Hmm.
because of one simple fact that humans can use tools. Now, for the first time in history, we are enabling the same capability to the AI, to the LLM.
Right.
Now, AI can use tools and it can do orders of magnitudes of things that it could never imagine. That's why this is going to explode, right? That's
Right.
why this
100%.
this is this is going to completely change. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think something I wanted to touch on too is I've been talking to a couple of people in my network, and it seems like it's this switch, right, from this model of SMEs using AI, right, to leverage their activities to maybe someone that's outside of the industry coming in a couple of years or maybe end of 2025 if we're lucky, where if I have a basic understanding of how something works, if there's a tool for it, I can use it and leverage my basic experience to build something out, right, which is unheard of, right?
Yep.
In the sense
Yep.
of if I know there's a gap in the market, let's say in a software space or a tech space, and I know that there's a tool that could fix it, and then I go to another tool to help me build that, and maybe I don't have coding experience, now I can do that. I don't have to go to a
Yep.
custom software development company and pay them 50 to 100 grand to build that out, which is insane to think about in the long term, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because concepts are becoming real, right? Because even
Hmm.
even for us, right, we build very sophisticated software. But in the years, I mean, like 2 to 3 years ago, whenever we wanted to create some new ideas or efficiencies or IP, I would spend a lot of time with the head of my head of engineering. He's been working for me for 20 years and for early from the old Apple days. So he's kind of been with me through all my companies and
Hmm.
so on. Then he has big teams underneath him. So those
Right.
those guys will, prototype it, and 2 weeks later, we'll have a prototype looking at it. So
Hmm.
now if I have an idea, I go to either our own agent one and put the idea in. I'll copy the
Hmm.
paper where I got the idea from and say, generate code, write
Yeah.
me a stub, right?
Hmm.
So from, when I do that when the Netflix movie starts, and by the time the movie ends, I have everything I need, right?
Right.
Including a tested stats and fully ready like diagrams, everything to be handing over to engineering. So that's the level of power. I think it's a long time ago. I think Steve Jobs had this really amazing, impressive comment that I think he saw this. I mean, the computes. They asked him about it was in the early 90s. He said, "What do you think about the personal computer?" Right. So he
Hmm.
said like the personal computer and these type of tool usage is sort of the bicycle for your brain, right?
Hmm.
Um, Generative AI and agentic AI is like a supercar for your brain,
Right, right, 100%.
right?
And
Yeah,
go ahead, sorry.
no, it is supercar for your brain. So regardless of what you do, it supercharges you at what you do, right?
Hmm.
Which means some sort of the jobs that you do today may become irrelevant because it supercharges everybody, right? It's a democratic force. So the trick is figuring out how to create value. But if you are in a place where there is value, the creation, you just have to press on the gas and go
Hmm.
fast and even faster. Yeah.
100%. And thank you so much for sharing that and your insights around that. And switching up a little bit, as we kind of specialize on the marketing side, we know really how hard it is because of these advancements to like cut through the noise and stand out
Yeah.
in software and tech with your tools. So we'd like to know how are you guys doing it at Iterate? How are you standing above the noise, reaching out to new clients, and like taking on these enterprise companies?
Yeah, I think we have a couple of strategies. One is, of course, if you look at our business, we break it into two parts. We have a direct business, which our direct salespeople sell,
Hmm.
and as well as it's a very high touch business, the direct business. So we work with senior leaders in companies. We are not a consulting company, we're purely a software company. But because this is such a new space, we sometimes have to teach the leaders what it
Of
is,
course.
create point of views, create perspectives, help them through their roadmap and all that stuff. But then eventually they'll adopt our software, right? So
Hmm.
direct business is so there. I think that the thing is to create the right point of views and help
Hmm.
senior leaders think through, right? Because you are their friend, right?
Right.
Because nobody won't ever want anything to be sold to them. Can you
Hmm.
genuinely help them solve their problems, right? We've done so many times where people just call me up, very senior leaders, board members of companies. Hey, Brian, I have this thing. What do you think, right?
Hmm.
And we just give them free advice because end of the day, you want to help your leaders who eventually may or may not become your customers, but help them all, right? So
Of
that's kind
course.
of in the direct business, a lot of creating the right point of views, the right thinking paradigms to help them think through. On the channel business, of course, we are selling through channels and educating and training the channel resellers and everyone. And of course, just like everybody else, we have two PR firms that we work closely with. I do my own podcast, and we also
Hmm.
participate in podcasts. We have teams of other members in the company who often are part of it. We also speak in a lot of different councils of places, so those are things that my partner is in some of the legislative councils. He speaks as a part of the Denver, Colorado Technology Association. So many different places. It's a part of the journey, right?
Hmm.
So I think it's a part. I think the education to leadership, not just within your company, but outside to leaders that you're selling to, is an important part of the business, right? Help them genuinely help them solve problems, right? I think giving them a paradigm, I think is a big value add.
100%. And I think there's
Yeah,
two sides to that, right? Like we said, there's one, building authority in the space, right? By
yeah,
running the podcast, which I thought was awesome. I did check it out before we hopped on. You do a great job on those, and they're super interesting and really on topic with your brand, right? Which is what it should be. And then on the other side is educating, right? Especially when we're talking about tech, that leaders that might be older, or this is something that's the adoption rates are slowly increasing right now,
yeah.
or down the line they'll increase a lot, but establishing that relationship, right? So I'm glad you mentioned that there's kind of two sides to that coin
Yeah, yeah. No,
almost.
absolutely. And then there is also a lot of sort of misinformation in the industry, and also
Of
helping
course.
leaders kind of get through some of these, kind of understand these misconceptions, and kind of help them think through some of them, right? I'll give you some classic examples, right?
Of
One
course.
of them is one misconception is, well, we have a big development team within our company. We are going to get some open source and build it ourselves, right?
Hmm.
One is especially in the LLM world and this type of generative AI world. These are systems that are non-deterministic, right? If
Right.
and just because something is open, it doesn't mean they are truly open, because your cost is your engineering cost. You will spend a
Hmm.
lot of cycles, right? Sometimes it's good to talk to a company that have already solved all those problems, that already has made the investment, so you don't keep making the investment over and over again, right?
Of
So
course.
that's kind of one misconception, I think, because open source is never free, right? It Everything comes with a cost, right?
Someone's paying for it somewhere,
Yeah,
right?
someone you got to pay for somewhere, right?
Right.
And then here it's more difficult because these things are very non-deterministic systems. If you engineers are learning a lot from the scratch and trying to build mega systems, it's very hard, even though you might have big engineering teams, because these systems, LLMs and all these things are like, it's like almost like a cat running around a laser pointer, right? Because it'll give you different results. It'll work 80% of the time, and there will be the remaining, getting the remaining 5% will be like super difficult. It'll be like it's 95% of your effort, right? So those are
100%.
things that you want to think about. The other thing, I think, a big misconception is like, well, I have a big cloud partner or a cloud provider, and I'm just gonna go with them, right?
Hmm.
And then because there is a lot, because these guys have big marketing, and they already have established customers, so they go to every one of their leadership and do mega QBRs, like takes a day
Hmm.
long, a day long, and they have the strength to put behind it. But then the problem is, like every enterprise problem in their world, initially it might be interesting, but not all enterprise problems are scalable problems, right? Because enterprises have so many unique nuanced things, and then they make a decision to go with a provider, and then 6 weeks later they're like, oh, you know what, this cannot be solved. Then you got to
Of
bring in an
course.
Accenture or somebody in, right? So
Hmm.
those kind of things. So think about how you look at the project, right? And because earlier, like, and also this whole build versus buy decision in this agentic world, it's essentially, it's not build versus buy. It's just connect everything to an agent.
Right.
Right? The business has changed. So there will be some build, some buy, but the goal is to connect everything to an agent, right?
Of
Or
course.
a couple of hundred agents, right? So
Hmm.
that's the thinking have to change for larger companies, and that's kind of the world we are in. Yeah.
Of course. And kind of shifting to maybe the more personal side of things, what does your typical day to day look like?
Great question. The day-to-day typically look like, I think I try to, in the first hour or two, I work with the technology teams,
Hmm.
because we have some remote teams. We have our main interplay product, our generate product. So work with those teams just to make sure major customer deployments are ready and so on, just to kind of understand where the statuses are, and also look at roadmaps. And then the remaining, I think, starting from like 10:30 onwards until like 5:30 or 6, it goes into like customer meetings, mostly meeting
Hmm.
customers, talking to clients, partners. Now with the new relationship in 2023, December, I think we had 3 partners. Now we have 30 some partners.
Wow.
Right. There's a
That's
lot of
awesome.
partner related conversations, and like, sales teams getting trained, and our sales guys are training their salespeople or the resellers. So like there's a lot of meetings that happen, right? And then also, like,
Hmm.
I spend a little bit of time on finance and strategy with my co-founder, in terms of either fundraise or specifically on strategic relationships with certain customers, right? The bigger
Hmm.
customers, or like even strategic partners. So that's kind of the typical day look like. And then if then I take a few hours off, like, spending time with family, and then start back again at about 8:30, which will go until 2 a.m.
Gotcha.
Right. That's
Gotcha.
mostly those are mostly like catching up and business catching up work, or engineering work, catching up work with the teams. Yeah.
Of course, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for sharing. I mean, that's a busy day, and I think most entrepreneurs and startup founders probably feel the same kind of pay that you do with the hours, and I think most people enjoy it. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah, it's
awesome.
definitely fun. I think it's also one of the things we are also trying to do is to take our own because we have 2 types of software that we go through. One is our own product
Hmm.
software that we release, right? Like
Hmm.
our major products to customers, but also customizations to big customers. So the customizations to big customers still have to be done by humans because it's a lot of deep enterprise stuff, and we don't want to experiment on them.
Hmm.
But our own software, our goal is to generate as much as possible using our own software generation, coding agents and others. I mean, we are not there yet, but I think, we are probably, I think the bigger companies are doing 30, 40%, 25, 30%. We are probably in the 40% range. Our goal
Hmm.
is probably we want to get into the 75 to 85% range.
That
Yeah.
would be awesome.
Machine built. Yeah.
And that kind of leads into my next question, which is what's on the roadmap for Iterate in the next 6 to 12 months? Are there any big product features or launches that are in the near future?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There's a lot of launches. One is of our Generate platform, Generate Enterprise, because we're focusing a lot on. We have a version that runs on AI PC, but our focus primarily is on Generate Enterprise. We are actually putting in more agentic connectors because end of the day,
Hmm.
agents are like basically brain. Without the arm and a leg, an agent is useless, right?
Hmm.
How do you build the right enterprise connectivity into them? So we are bringing in a lot of enterprise integration capabilities into these agents. So right out of the box, an agent can be useful, right? A lot of
Hmm.
companies say, well, we have an agent, but the question is, the moment you start talking to an enterprise, they will say, well, we have these old COBOL systems, or we have this JD Edwards system, or whatever, like, which is like,
Right, right.
well, it doesn't, and then sometimes it doesn't even have APIs to talk to, right? So the idea is to how do you make these things so that getting that agentic process very seamless is one. The other, I think, is our part of our channel strategy. We have these jet streams. So a lot of our products, especially we have one of the industries we are in is in the storage industry. We are
Hmm.
providing generative capabilities. We are expanding that product line. The significant investments there. That's kind of the second piece we are looking at. And also on small devices. That's kind of the third big
Hmm.
thing. And then, of course, the fourth thing is Interplay, our core platform. We are bringing in a new version of Interplay. We already have agentic building capability, auto coding tool into Interplay, but we're also seamlessly integrating Interplay with Visual Studio Code and others. So the
Hmm.
traditional engineers can work along with the side by side with the low code. And we are also bringing in a very powerful, like NVIDIA style NIMS type capability, right?
Hmm.
So because AI is like, how do you get the the developers, the teams right out of the box, click on something and boom, it works, right? That's kind of one, because that's where the magic is. And how
Of
do you
course.
enable a lot of those boom, it works scenario, right? These templates and so on. So that's kind of the some of the major roadmap paths we are, and then some of them we are already well ahead into our plans. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. I think a lot of our viewers are going to be excited for some of those things that are on that roadmap and they're coming out. But that kind of leads me into my last question that I have for you today. But if you had a magic wand and could solve just one problem within the business, what would that be?
I think there are lots of problems to solve. Maybe I want to solve two of them, right? I think one magic one would be I want every new release fully machine generated, right? I
Hmm.
want humans to kind of architect them, be planners, and fully machine generated, machine tested, machine user tested, machine persona tested, right?
Of
End to
course.
end. So that's my first magic one
Hmm.
interest, right? Second interest, second thing is I think we want to get um, a lot of the channel sales stuff. I think we would I would be very interested in, like, an extensive propagation of the channels in terms of sort of channel sales, because channel is still very early in the sense that people are still trying to figure out AI. I would
Of
expect
course.
that magic one would be like everyone's matured, everybody wants this one, right?
Right, right.
That would be really interesting, right? So today I think there's a lot of education progress process happening, but that will change, right? Because everything goes through an evolution and changes, right? So yeah.
Definitely. And I think a lot of tech founders are in your same boots on the ladder of your magic wands, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
But if people want to connect with you or learn more about what Iterate is doing, where could they go and how can they
Um,
connect?
yeah, well, the easiest is LinkedIn, Brian Sathianathan. The other is Brian at iterate.ai. It's very simple. It's my first name at the company name. Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah.
Awesome. I will leave the links to the Iterate website along with Brian's LinkedIn and his email, and I highly recommend that you check her out. Iterate and the incredible things they're doing in this space. It was super educational going on the website. It really broke it down, even for someone that's a little bit outside of the coding space. But other than that, thank you again, Brian, for your time and insights today, and we will see you guys on the next podcast.